Guys, welcome back to another video, and following on from our previous video where I talk about APIs and how you can query an API using Python. This time I want to show you how you can actually handle JSON data and then convert JSON data into a data frame and subsequently a CSV or an Excel file. So for those of you who missed that first video, there's a link up on the screen now where you can go watch that first video. It's a good starting point, especially if you want to go through some of the code, if you want to work out step by step how we got to the point where we are now. But I'll give you a quick run through of some of the code that we've already written. So firstly, we're using a library called requests, and requests allows us to handle APIs within Python. We're then assigning a variable called URL, and to that variable we're assigning our base URL, which is for the API. This is the random data API. It generates a set of random user data profiles, and we're asking it to return one record, so one user profile. On our next line of code, we're asking requests to run a get statement, a get request. So there's different types of API calls. What we're doing is a get request which fetches data for us, and we're going to ask request to handle that. And that itself is assigned to a variable called response. Call it whatever you like, we've just called it response. And then on our next line of code, on our fourth line of code, which you see here on what says cell 176, you've got a statement where we're asking requests to then capture and handle the JSON data, and we're wrapping that into a variable called API result. And this is what our data looks like. This is essentially a print statement. Without typing print in Jupyter, you can just type in the actual variable name. And if we click run all, we can actually see what that result is. So here you can see we've got a number of what looks like field names here: ID, UID, password, first name, surname. And it goes down quite a few fields in length until we get to term. It's a bit hard to read. As you can see, there's loads of brackets, there's loads of speech marks, there's loads of colons. Essentially, we want to be able to view it in a more nicer visual or in a nicer format so we can dissect and kind of analyze the result. Before we do that, what we want to do is go into Google, and I want you guys to search for something called JSON Tree Viewer. What is that? A JSON Tree Viewer essentially allows you to view your JSON data in an easy visual reference. So I'll show you what I mean. I'm going to copy our JSON data, and I want to kind of understand it a bit better. I want you guys to click on the second result, which is jsonviewer.stack.hu. And under text tab, I want you to paste your JSON data and then go into viewer. And this is where the magic happens. So here we can now see in a more cleaner format all the JSON fields that we returned in our query. So here you can see ID, UID, the first name, the last name, and it looks fairly simple, looks fairly straightforward until you get to employment. You realize that employment as a field has another two subfields underneath it with two field values. It gets a bit more tricky under address. So a JSON tree viewer or a tree viewer like this allows you to kind of dissect your results, so you've got a better understanding of what you're looking at. This will be useful because we'll refer back to this when we convert to a data frame and a CSV file. And the other thing I want to mention is every time you run this script. So if you note here, the first name of this user is Earl Rogan. If we run this again, we've returned another user. Now, why is that? It's because this API is a random user generated API. So every time you run a call request or a get request, it's going to return a random set of data, and in this case, a random user. And that's okay. That's what we expect. Another APIs, depending on your exact parameter, what you put here will determine your results. But in our example here, we're going to return a random user every time. But it's okay because our format is still the same. So now what I want you to do is bring in what we're going to do is convert this into a data frame, and ultimately I want to export into a CSV file, and then in CSV I can then handle it and go on to do more work with it. I might want to visualize it, I might want to do some analysis, whatever that may be, or I might want to use it and populate a database. So we're going to go import, and we're going to type in pandas as PD. That allows us to start working with data frames. I'm going to hash this result. I don't want to see this print statement all the time. Using a hash comments out your code. Create a new line, and this is what we're going to do. In our line of code, what we want to do now is wrap up our JSON into a data frame. This is how we're going to do it. We're going to type in df1, which is short for dataframe1, pd.json underscore normalize. Now, why normalize? What we're going to do is we're going to ask pandas to automatically handle this JSON data for us. In other tutorials you'll see on YouTube, people recommend assigning each column to a new field. So essentially you're creating your own table or data frame on a field by field basis. But what we're going to ask pandas to do is just have a go at that automatically. And then we need to ask pandas to normalize our API results. So we're going to type in API result. I can't remember if it's got an underscore here. Yes, it does. So API result, and we're good to go. And then in order to print this, I'm just going to type in df1. So let's have a look at what df1 looks like. Perfect. Now we're getting somewhere. It looks like we've actually got some of our JSON data in what now seems to be a table, essentially a table format. We can see it's spanning horizontally. So if we look at our tree viewer, we can see we've got ID, UID, password, first name, surname. Let's just check that. We've got ID, UID, password, first name, surname, last name. It's looking good. It's looking like pandas has handled this very well. It looks like a good conversion. The challenge, my main concern is these address fields. Let's just take a look at that. And remember, address has got city, street name, street address. And then it gets to coordinates. You got longitude and latitude and longitude, which are shortened to lat and long, LNG. Let's have a look. So we've got address here. So these three dots mean that the print statement essentially is not shown as everything, but we can check that shortly. We can see we've got zip code, we've got state, country. And this is good because we now can see we've got lat and long. So this has come out quite good. I'm happy with this. I'm actually quite pleased with this. Another way to look at the result is to flip it. So instead of looking at it horizontally, you can look at it vertically, spanning down. To do that, we need to run another method on our data frame. Another line of code that kind of flips our data, and this is what we're going to do. So I want you guys to, you can leave this as it is, just hash it out. We're going to insert a new row. And this time I want to do df2 equals df1, but we're going to melt it. This is a method that allows you to flip your data frame. Let's run this. To run it, we need to put in one more line of code. We need to type in df2. Let's run df2. And voila, we now have our JSON results in a data frame, and all the fields are displayed vertically along. So this is perfect. I can now see address, I can see employment. Remember those two employment nested fields that we had? We've got title and key skill. Well, we've now captured those properly here. We've got employment, title, and key skill with the results. So this is great. I can now export this to a CSV. So this is how you do it. Let's add another line of code, and this is a simple, essentially conversion line of code that converts our data. So df2 dot to underscore CSV, and we're going to give it a name. Let's call it JSON result .csv. And then you might have noted that we've got the field name, which is called variable. We've got a value, which is a value here. And then we've got these numbers running down the side. I don't actually want those numbers anymore. I want to drop them. This is known as an index. So to drop the index, you can just delete it when you open your CSV file, or you can just do this and type in index equals false. And then finally, to confirm this is done, to confirm that it's outputted to a CSV file, I'm going to ask Python to print a done statement or complete statement. Just keep it as done, and let's run this. Let's just see how it looks. Perfect, done. And now let's find our file. So you're going to have to search for this on your own machine, but on my machine, I'll show you where it's located. So typically it's under your C drive, users, your username, and it should be under here. So we're looking for a CSV file called JSON results. JSON result. So we've got this one right here. Let's have a look. And voila, we've now got our data in a CSV file. So guys, that's just a really short example just to show you how you can, manipulate JSON data from an API request and pull it into a CSV file. I mean, I might want to go back here and do a bit more amendment. For instance, I may want to actually return not just one set of data for one user. I might want 10. If I now run this, it's going to give me a really long list moving down. So I might want to flip it back. I might actually want to kill the melt statement and go back to a horizontal layout, so I can do that as well. So we could do something like this, df, just get rid of the melt statement here, and we're going to run 10, and we're going to output to CSV. Let's get out the CSV that I'm in. Let's go back to our code. Let's run this. Done. You can now see our data for 10 records is back in the original horizontal format. Let's go into the file. Let's have a look. Great. We now have the results in the right format that I wanted. I'm just going to space this out. Add a quick filter. Control Shift and L. It quickly adds a filter to your selected, highlighted row of choice. And here you can see first names, last names. Let's go have a look at address. You can see address, employment key, skill, employment title. Everything's come out as I liked it, as I wanted it. So guys, hope this has been a good learning for you. If we now go back to our Python code, in a future session, I will cover the same again, but this time we'll look at private APIs, or APIs which require API keys. And we'll also look at how you can push API results into a database, like a cloud database. Otherwise, please do like, subscribe, and follow along. And I promise to come back to you with more learning videos and more videos on tech, data skills, data engineering, data science. Thank you for watching. Take care.